I'm going to say that Chief Moore should be fired. And the police commission isn't an oversight board if you aren't actively pushing for this. Blaming protesters for George Floyd's death is bad. It's horrible. But my God, when it turns out that the police are the ones causing the mayhem at protests, we have a huge problem here.
Chief, you need to step down. You need to resign, or this commission needs to do its job and fire you.
And if you are in any way serious about serious change, Chief Moore has got to go.
You should all be ashamed of yourself.
He's blaming the protesters for George Floyd's death. Are you kidding me? Chief Moore needs to be fired.
I think he absolutely should be fired. The commissioner, all of you should be doing your job and making sure that this man no longer shows up.
I get it. It was your knee-jerk reaction. But if that's your knee-jerk reaction, then you're not in the right job. I think you need to seriously consider resigning and allowing somebody who's better suited for this position to take over.
How dare you, Chief Moore? I'm quoting you from before because I typed it as you said it. We will investigate each complaint, and I promise to hold accountable anyone who violates our policy or commits misconduct. You sure haven't set a great precedent of that.
If you all really take your job seriously, you will fire this man.
I am a 16-year-old young Black woman. Do you know the trauma behind watching countless Black men and women be killed by racist police officers? And you are seriously gonna sit here and say that it is our fault that an innocent Black man was suffocated to death? You should all be ashamed of yourselves. I'm 16 years old, and I know more than all of you.
I'm also here to call for the resignation of Sheriff Moore. I do believe that you're genuinely sorry about the reaction to your comments, but I would prefer a sheriff that never had those thoughts to begin with.
You being responsible as a police chief with so many deaths of African-American men and women, I mean, you might as well basically look at Commissioner Bonner right now and tell him that his kids' lives don't matter to you, because one day they're going to be as old as him and they're going to be abused by the police if something doesn't happen. So respectfully, I think you need to lose your job.
Really quickly, I'm calling for the resignation of Police Chief Moore because it's clear that your priorities are to protect your police force and not the people of Los Angeles.
Chief Moore, telling us stories that you feel justify your violence is not acceptable. Your story is not enough. We don't want to hear your narrative. We want you to listen to the stories of Black people, the stories that you have worked to codify for generations. I have no choice but to advocate for the defunding of the police.
For Chief of Police, since you mentioned prayer, I am a prayerful person as well. And out of the overflow of a heart is what a man speaks. So if you misspoke, you really do need to go within your heart. If you are a believer, and understand why those words came out of your mouth.
We call for the resignation of the Police Chief Moore, who clearly doesn't understand.
This is civil unrest by definition, and Chief Moore should resign.
Unfortunately, we have no other option but to request the defunding of your department. Thank you. I yield the time.
First, Chief Moore, your words last night as the leader of LAPD, your philosophy, your thoughts, and your words are important. What you said was a travesty and unacceptable. And it does not allow you to be the example that we expect officers should follow. If you're the leader, what you think and say is important. You cannot always back out and apologize out of things that you say. You should definitely resign. You should leave. No one believes you. You need to go.
And Chief Moore, your response is not enough. I could see the rest of you commissioners, as you were listening to Chief Moore give his statement, the shame in your faces as you recognize that his statements were not enough. He needs to be out.
Chief Moore's comments, or his attempt to walk them back later, did not diminish his obvious sincerity when he made his remarks. Chief Moore should be censured by the police commission for his comments, and he should be replaced as chief.
Calling today to express major concern with Chief Moore and the policing mentality as a whole with LAPD. I'm calling for Chief Moore to be fired as well.
I hope that Deputy Moore, you do lose your job.
I would like to direct the bulk of my comments to Chief Moore, and I'm about to scold you. Your words last night were disgusting, and you cannot walk those back.
People have spent the bulk of this meeting telling you to resign. If I had hundreds of people lining up to tell me that I was this terrible at my job, I wouldn't sit there blinking. We are upset at you.
I demand this department to be defunded and redistributed to the communities that it has terrorized. You should be ashamed of yourself.
So things must change. And if we really want to change things, we need to show people that we're serious about change. And that means step one, Michael Moore must resign or be fired. Step two, we need to offer real tangible solutions like an independent review board.
One, I'm calling to state my hope for the resignation of Chief Police Moore.
First of all, let me start out by saying that those were the most asinine, ignorant statements that the police chief made yesterday. He needs to be fired just for making those statements alone. That is the kind of statement that engenders distrust. That's the kind of statement that causes us to say this person does not need to be in leadership anywhere, anytime.